I needed to do everything I could to help the Latter-day Saints understand and love the Old Testament as much as possible.
I have the ability to share and inspire people with literature and history, but then also financially be able to help those less fortunate.
But we found that the Lord needed us, and I think there's a reason why we were there when we were there.
Hello and welcome to Latter-day Profiles. I'm Brian Howard. We're here at the LDS Motion Picture Studio in Provo, Utah. And joining me today is Grant and Cy Foster. Welcome. So good to have you.
It's nice to be here.
Yeah, so many people will recognize Cy for A Bountiful Kitchen. If you follow the Bountiful Kitchen on Instagram or on her blog, and gosh, I think that I checked like 90,000 followers at least or something like that. And then Grant is a lawyer as part of a practice, Dorsey and Whitney. We want to talk about a lot of things, but you two just recently, how many months ago, you returned from a mission to Barcelona, Spain. It's been a little bit of a while now. But
It's been six or 7 months.
6 or 7 months, which is a very interesting story. But we want to give your backstory, both about a little bit of background about A Bountiful Kitchen and also about your story about being active in the church and choosing to serve a mission. So we'll break it up into parts, I guess. But let's go to the early years. So Grant, I know that we were talking about you grew up, you ended up, I think, senior year in Lehigh as you were talking. Weren't quite sure about church, a mission. I don't think it was in the cards, but something changed your mind and a mission really changed your, how committed you were to the church.
It was interesting. I didn't have any direction in my life. My parents had divorced when I was 16. So I was one of these kids sort of lost in high school, didn't go to seminary, went to church a little bit, went away to Dixie College. I was an athlete, so I went down there for a year, and then I got back. And so after I turned 19, it's the summer, I had an experience that was very profound. Clearly, it's Heavenly Father's way of putting someone in my path that made me feel something. I didn't know at the time. It's clearly the Spirit that was working on me. I went to go talk to my bishop, and out of the blue, told him that I thought maybe going on a mission might be a good idea. He didn't let grass grow under his feet. He immediately had me speak to the stake presidency, and before you know it, I'm working on mission papers, and really with not a lot of preparation. But turned out that as I started my mission, this is before they raised the bar, I will tell you that. But as I started, I felt the Spirit strongly. And to me, the key to everything I did as a missionary was when I opened the Book of Mormon and read it in the MTC for the first time. And the Spirit testified powerfully of the truthfulness of that book, and it just changed everything. I saw my purpose as a missionary. I learned the gospel. I learned the language, which I believe was a gift that stemmed directly from reading the Book of Mormon. So it was a profound experience.
So the MTC, big experience, reading the scriptures, temple, big experience to really gain your testimony.
Yeah, the temple was interesting because I had zero prep, and I had I would say a very challenging first experience in the temple. But then I had an amazingly inspired branch president in the MTC, and he said, when I was sharing my concerns with him about the temple experience, he said, okay, Elder Foster, I want you to do two things. I want you to, number one, miss dinner the night before you go to the temple, fast, and then I want you to try to push away the symbolism and focus on how you feel. So that's what I did, and that was the first time attending the temple in the MTC after these spiritual experiences during the week. And it was a profound experience. So much so that the next Sunday, wouldn't recommend this, but I didn't eat anything. And then went fasting the next Sunday, and for 8 weeks. When I left the MTC, I knew, now I know, I didn't know what to call it then, but as I look back, I clearly was endowed with power from on high to serve a mission, and went and had an amazing experience among the amazingly beautiful people of Chile.
Well, so I had a little bit different experience, but growing up, family not that active in the church, and then I think you went down to Dixie, right? And then decided to be more active in the church. Tell a little bit about your background and your experience and how you met Grant.
Well, my father was a member of the church, but never really active. He was raised in Delta, Utah, and he had pioneer ancestors and that joined the church in England and Ireland. And my dad joined the Navy when he was quite young after he graduated, and he was never active in the church again. I'm pretty sure my dad made his mother, a promise that he would take his children to church. So my mom and my dad dropped my brother and I off to church every Sunday when I was growing up until I was about 12. And then he just said, if you want to keep going to church, we'll keep taking you. But if not, once I graduated from primary, he said, but if not, that's okay. And I think my brother and I it just felt odd. We just felt like everybody else was sitting with their family. And for us, I think I was to the point where I realized I don't really want to come to church anymore just with my brother. And so I stopped going to church at that time. And then I moved to Utah after my first year of college, and I met some girls that were going to school in St. George, and they invited me to come along. And I had a boyfriend in Las Vegas, and I wanted to live closer to him. And so I went to school at Dixie. It was Dixie College then. Met Grant probably the first week I moved there. And we were in the same ward, lived in the same apartment complex. And anyway, so we became friends, and we were friends for a few months before we started dating. And we were married within a few months after we started dating.
That's awesome. Grant, I hear you're creative with the home teaching assignments. Is that correct?
In fairness, I was in the Elders Quorum presidency. They assigned me pretty quickly after we started attending the student ward, and I have to confess I did assign myself to be her home teacher.
The testimony of home teaching. Faithful home teaching leads to blessings.
It worked well for me.
Well, we're going to fast forward a little bit because obviously you have family and you've decided to be very committed to the gospel, which is amazing. And so at some point, kids get a little older, you get into this blog thing. How did that start? Was it somebody's idea or was it your idea? How'd you get going?
Well, I belonged to a group, we called it Recipe Club, for 14 years. There were women that we gathered a few times a year, and we would choose a theme, like Italian, or we'd pick a cookbook and all cook out of it. And there were 10 of us. And my oldest daughter, Corinne, who is also, both of our daughters are also bloggers. And our oldest daughter at the time was, I believe, going to BYU. And she just said, why don't I set a blog up for you and your Recipe Club friends? So instead of bringing your recipes copied off every time, you can just put them on this blog. And then you'll have your recipes there. And it just never really caught on with the other women. There were maybe 2 or 3 of us that got it. And so after a few months, I asked Corinne if she would just set up a blog for me. And because people would ask me for recipes, and I thought this is way easier than copying things off. So she put together this blog for me, and we were living in Bountiful at the time. And I still remember one night I woke up and I had this thought that came to me: if I ever write a cookbook, I will call it A Bountiful Kitchen. So I told her, why don't we just name it A Bountiful Kitchen? So that was in 2008.
2008, brand new blog, no real followers. How long did it take to catch on? Because clearly now, here we are in 2022. It's got thousands of people who follow it.
Yeah, it just grew by word of mouth. Really, after social media became a thing, it wasn't at all. I mean, social media was not a thing in 2008.
Right.
But within a few years, I think by about 2012, 2013 is when people started using social media for business purposes, and it just has grown organically since then.
Was there a point where you noticed it's like, oh, there's lots of people who are following?
Yeah, probably a lot when we even just are around town. Because I just thought it was my friends that were that were following the blog, and people would stop me in the grocery store and say, "Are you a Bountiful Kitchen?" And so usually people don't only know bloggers or people that are on social media by whatever their handle is.
Right.
So yeah.
That's right. Like your daughter, Mint Arrow. I told her it should be a superhero name, right? Wearing a green suit. One of the things I really appreciate about both you and your daughters is you share your beliefs. Was that a difficult choice? I mean, are you a little wary about sharing the gospel with so many people?
A little bit at first. I remember the first time I shared my testimony, I was sitting in the airport. I had actually been out to California and was visiting Corinne. And I felt this very strong prompting to share something about the Savior. It was on Easter. It was in Easter weekend. And I just shared my testimony and just, wrote a post about my commitment to following the gospel of Jesus Christ and the beliefs that we had. And I really didn't know what to expect. I thought, well, if I post this and someone doesn't like it, I'm sure they'll let me know. But I felt really strongly about it. And really most of the time, people are just very supportive. And I think even people that aren't members of our church, they really love it when other people share what's in their hearts. So.
Yeah, that makes sense. Well, Grant, I want to ask you, you had a very successful career, partner law firm, moving along, and suddenly you have a feeling like maybe it's time to do some missionary service. How did that come about? Because that would be quite an epiphany, I guess, or would you question yourself? It's like, man, is it time?
Well, candidly, Craig Galley, who was he was called to preside over the Spain-Barcelona mission, was my partner for roughly 15 years at Holland and Hart. I was at Holland and Hart at the time, and he approached me and said, "Grant, I just got off the phone with the currently serving mission president, and your name came to mind, that you need to come help me." And I went home and I told Cy, and we both were like, well, that's thoughtful, but we're 10 years away from retiring. We're in our 50s. And then every day I would think about it, and I would come home after a couple of months. I'm like, well, honey, I know that it's not the time, but just to let you know, I'm thinking about this every day. And of course, we decided to fast and pray about it before a Saturday night session of stake conference, and had the most powerful revelatory experience that we've ever shared, because it wasn't just me, it was both of us, in that Saturday night session of stake conference. And the Lord told us unequivocally, you need to go. And so then the question is, when and how long? I had just moved from from Holland and Hart to Dorsey and Whitney in January, and this is now March. So we had a lot of logistics to figure out, but in the end, like the Lord does, He found a way for us to arrange our affairs, and we were able to go serve, and it was really an amazing experience.
As I'm sure you're wondering, you're doing this, blog, Instagram. What do you do when you're on a mission? Did you discuss that and decide how you're going to move forward with that?
We did. We talked to the mission president about it ahead of time, and both he and Lark, his wife, said, we think that you should continue sharing and continue blogging, because it's a great missionary tool. And so before we left, I just created a lot of content, a lot of recipes that would go up, and then we shared a lot on social media about just our day-to-day life, what we were doing, not just food, but the little things we were doing. I mean, when Grant would color my hair, and just different things that you do as senior missionaries that may be different than your normal life back at home. And it was, I received hundreds. I should count sometime. I don't know if I can even go back and count, but I received hundreds of messages from people saying, oh, this is fascinating, or I didn't know. I mean, we started with our mission call, but then we took people through the MTC, and a lot of people, said things like, oh, my son or daughter, have been in the MTC, or I've had 5 kids go through the MTC. I've never seen the inside of it, or senior missionaries that would say, or seniors that would say, we really want to go on a mission, but now that I can see you doing this, I can picture myself doing this. So I think it was fun for us to share in that way, and it was really interesting to read a lot of the feedback that we received.
Were there also people who were not members of the church who are curious about missionary service?
Very much so. Yeah, wanting to know, who pays for this? Do you get paid? All kinds of questions. So
that's great, and you were able to answer them at least in part to what the question they had.
Right.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you get there, and this is back in pre-COVID days. We didn't even know what COVID was at that point. We never heard of the thing. Now, of course, that's changed. But things were pretty good right at the beginning, right? You started. What was your first assignment? I think working with the young people is what your assignment was.
Yeah.
We received YSA calls. We were also assigned to the Balearic Islands, which was a district, so the concept was to help President Galley out on the islands. We were there for 7 weeks with no restrictions. Even though we had already heard about COVID, we started our mission on the 13th of January. The first official case arrived from a plane from China in the United States on the 15th of January, so COVID slotted right into our mission. But about 7 weeks later, everything got locked down and our mission changed. But, not surprisingly, President and Sister Galley were amazingly inspired to keep the missionaries busy. They immediately, because our senior missionary corps shrunk from 27 to 7, we mobilized and we taught all kinds of lessons and were involved. So I was involved in food. We taught institute, and as well as many other programs. So I became the person in charge of social media for our mission, which then became the instrument for finding and teaching. And it changed a lot. But we found that the Lord needed us, and I think there's a reason why we were there when we were there.
I was wondering, because you felt so strongly, and then this hit, question, wow. And was that part of your decision? I don't know if you had an option when they're sending people home. Should you stay? Should you go? But you did stay. What was that decision like?
Well, they did send all of the senior missionaries home, or ask them all to go home. And we were able to stay. I think there were 7 of us that stayed all together. Some missions, I don't think, had any senior missionaries stay. Most missions, I think, were permitted to have one couple stay in the office. But the Spain missions the Barcelona mission anyway, is really spread out. And so there was one couple that stayed in the north of the mission, and then the galleys, and then Rosalie, who was the office missionary, she stayed. And there was another couple that she was a mission nurse and her husband was a family history missionary. And then we stayed in the islands. So we were all kind of spread out and taking care of the missionaries in different areas of the mission. We just requested to stay, and
after they asked us to leave, we just said, can you reconsider? And President Galley communicated with Elder DeFeo from the area presidency, and they eventually let us stay. We were very grateful. We think that was one of the reasons that the Lord wanted us to serve at a younger age, because He gave us at least an argument as to why we should be able to stay.
Young and healthy. How did things change at that point? It sounded like you took charge of social media. Clearly the gathering changed. And so a lot of over probably, I'm guessing, WhatsApp, and we're in Spain and other things. Looking back, can you see like the hand in the Lord of helping you out to figure these things out? Maybe there's some experiences you had as you went through it from day to day.
I mean, there were so many experiences. We grew together. We found ways to serve the saints in Spain in ways that we wouldn't have ever even imagined. I mean, our office was a table. It was a formal dining room table in the middle of our small apartment. Cy would be on one side, I would be on the other side. We'd wake up and we'd look at each other and go, it's another Groundhog Day. But yet we'd get busy. We'd start in the morning. We wouldn't end until the wee hours, and we were busy every day. And it was an amazing experience.
Yeah, I think we probably, because of COVID, we had the opportunity to do a lot of things we wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. I mean, we spent a lot of time on Zoom calls with missionaries. We did everything from PISO apartment inspections, cleaning inspections virtually, to Grant was in charge of gathering miracles, recording miracles for the mission. And then for 70 days, Spain had a really restrictive lockdown. So we were only allowed to leave one person at a time. The missionaries would take off their badges and leave them in their apartments, and then go to the grocery store and walk apart from each other and go to the grocery store, so they could go together but separately. It was not permitted to be out as couples, even if you lived in the same household for those 70 days. So we would walk a half a block apart from each other to go to the grocery store, and we had some really interesting experiences. We were stopped by the police a few times, but we were able to do a lot of things. Like every night for those 70 days, the mission had a mission-wide prayer, and someone would be assigned. We would all kneel in the apartments we were in, and we would say a prayer together every night as missionaries. And like Grant said, the galleys had so many things going for the missionaries, so that we were constantly, we had assignments and different things we were doing during the day besides the normal teaching. And we were also trying to keep track of all of our young adults that we were assigned to minister to as well.
One of the things that technology allowed us to do too is that we wouldn't have done otherwise, is spread our ability to communicate through Zoom calls and other calls with other missionaries in other parts of Spain, not just on the islands. And as a result, we were interviewing missionaries, helping President Galley, as they consented to, talk to them about all kinds of issues, including working up their My Plan, which is that end of mission plan that they put together before they would do their final interview with President Galley. And Cy would do the hermanas and I would do the elders, and it was an amazing experience to get to know them and work with them at that level as well.
Yeah, I mentioned the missionaries, especially what a struggle, difficult enough as a married couple to be stuck in a place for 70 days. The missionaries, who probably aren't as, familiar with each other, get really on each other's nerves after a little bit while. I'm imagining that you were probably a great resource to them to help them to get through those difficult times.
I think there were some rough days for some of the companionships, I think, and even the ones that got along really well. I remember we went over to visit two of our hermanas a few weeks into the quarantine, and they just looked weary. They got along really well, but when I saw them, they were just trying so hard to be cheerful. We were actually smuggling a phone over to them because one of the phones that they had was not working, and so their parent had sent a phone, and to our place, and so we were taking it over to them. And when I saw them and went up into their piso, I said, "How are you doing?" And they just, one of them was teary, and they said, "We're good. Tomorrow we get to take out the garbage." So they could take the garbage out once a week and go to the grocery store once every 2 weeks. So there was no going outside. You couldn't even go for a walk in Spain. So it was rough.
Those were small victories, being able to take out the garbage. I wish my kids were that excited about taking out the garbage. I want to ask you about, together, especially as a couple, going through that together, what was that experience like for you as far as, your relationship and drawing closer to Heavenly Father?
Wow, it was an amazing binding and bonding opportunity for us, for sure. We get along quite well, I think, in general, but it's not like serving a mission during COVID is easy for anybody, like Cy says. But I got really sick. I'm not sure if it was COVID, but Cy was there at my side for a few days. We never got tested because we didn't want to go to the hospital, but in the end, everything we did together, we just grew together. The spirit we felt, the faith that we were able to build together was just an amazing experience. We would cherish it. There's no way that you could ever pay or buy what we experienced. It was that special. What do you think?
It was an incredible experience. I have a lot of people, have had a lot of people say after we returned, what was it really like being with your husband inside for 18 months? And we got out once the really heavy lockdown was lifted. Even though we couldn't go to church for over a year, we still, every Monday, we went out and picked a place to explore together. We did a lot of hiking, a lot of outdoors things that we enjoy doing. But I think for us, it only strengthened my testimony more. It strengthened my testimony of, if you're doing what the Lord asks you to do, He makes you more than what you would be on your own. I don't know the scriptural reference, but there is a scripture that states this exact principle. And I think for us, the Lord, He made the burdens that we had light. And instead of seeming like burdens, they seemed like blessings to us.
One thing that for sure we gained an amazing amount of respect and appreciation for are the missionaries, the younger missionaries who served during COVID, and they will be forever spoken about in terms of being valiant and faithful and hardworking, and talk about persevering until the end. They were amazing, and we were grateful to be with them and to learn so much from them.
Well, Grant and Cy Foster, I really appreciate you coming. Whether you want to, be it or not, inspiration to a lot of people, whether they're thinking about serving as senior couples or as young missionaries looking to go up and go serve as a missionary. So thank you very much for taking the time to come visit today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.